Hi, History 102. How are you? Welcome to week 3. I had to think about that for a minute. All my other classes are 15-week classes. So when I have a 10-week class, I have to remember that we're not on the same weeks. All right, so let's get started as usual with my video overviews that I open on Monday morning. I'm just going to go through the module. I'm going to add extra information. I'm going to talk you through some of the handouts that I have. These videos are just a way to round out the information that's in the modules. I know a lot of teachers don't do this. They just open the modules and you have to just read all the stuff yourself. But I just think it's a nice thing to do. I think it builds community and you get to know me and I get to know you, especially through your discussion posts. So it's just helpful, right? I think. So let's get to it. Okay. All right. So let me share my screen. Okay, so here's our modules for this week. Again, we're in week 3. You can see I haven't opened it yet. I will, of course. I'm doing this before Monday. All right, so there's 3 parts to what we're doing this week. Do you guys have your notebooks out? Are you ready? Are you taking notes? So here's the 3 parts. The first part is that we're going to talk about the 1803 Louisiana Purchase. Then we're going to connect that to the Haitian Revolution. And believe it or not, the Haitian Revolution is going to lead us into week 5, the Civil War, believe it or not. So it'll sort of prep us for Civil War. The Haitian Revolution will. And then the third part is that we're going to talk about Andrew Jackson and Native American Indian Removal Act of 1830. So these first 3 weeks, we're really looking at, really the week 2 and week 3, we're looking at the early 1800s, and we're sort of jumping around a little bit between the early 1800, 1803 Louisiana Purchase and later things like the Mexican-American War in 46 and the Louisiana or the Manifest Destiny and the Indian Removal Act of 1830, but it's kind of all like brewing at the same time, right? So sorry if I'm not doing it chronologically, because I like grouping it better by like theme, but it's just so we're clear that we're bouncing around the first 30 or 40 years of the 19th century. All right, so let's get started. So again, you're just responsible for doing all the readings, but let me just give you a general overview and talk you through it a little bit. All right, so here's the Louisiana Purchase. This is what it looks like. I love maps. I don't know if you're visual learners like I am, but I really like pictures, and maps are really helpful. It just helps me remember things. It helps me ground down exactly. Like if I say, oh, the United States bought 800,000 miles. Well, what does that mean? Right? Like, what does 800,000 miles look like? So looking at maps, this is great stuff to Google. Looking at maps is incredibly helpful, I think, to give scope to what that actually means. So you can see all this, what became the states, all these states, a ton of them, right? It's basically the whole Midwest. What the area that we call the Midwest, right? East Coast, Midwest, South, West, Northwest, right? Southwest here. And these, you can see the 4 corners, right? You can put your hands and your feet at the 4 corners and be in 4 states at one time. Does everybody know that? The 4 corners? You can go to this exact spot. There's a whole national monument, and you put your hands and feet down and you're in 4 states at one time. It's a cool, like a bucket list kind of thing to do. I used to live out in New Mexico, and we went out there. It's really cool. So all right, so that's the Southwest. So this is what we're talking about, though. I digress. Here's the Midwest, is really what the Louisiana Purchased. Okay, so here's what we're talking about. So remember last week we were talking about Napoleon, and we were talking about the French and the Spanish. And what I think is really interesting is that most people don't know how much France and Spain owned of the United States. We really just think of the U.S. as like British owned, but it wasn't. There was a lot of territory that was owned by other countries. And it's kind of fascinating that we didn't end up being a Spanish speaking country or, French speaking country. So while all this is happening, there's all these negotiations going between France and the United States. And Napoleon, wanted to really take over, well, it had taken over all this territory and really wanted to keep all this territory and property. And what was Spain gave to France, and then France wanted to give to us. And it was this huge just European battle over our country, which is so fascinating. I don't think a lot of people know that. So make sure you read all about the politics here around that, and why that was the case. Okay. So this is the payday. So for all of this territory, and I'll go over the states that it included in a minute, for all this territory, it was 11 million, like cash outright. Then it was 3 million, almost 4 million against France for all the political reasons you're going to read about, and then interest payments. So the total price that we paid for the Midwest of the United States was $27 million. And can you imagine what that was? That's like billions, now in our currency now. So we had to, it was France, it was Spain, it was the U.S., all of this territory being exchanged and shuffled around, right? So what ends up being the actual territories are this. So here's the empire, right? This is really where we get this. So here's your first vocab word, well, aside from the Louisiana Purchase itself of 1803, is empire. And the idea of an empire really starts with like the British Empire. France doesn't really have an empire. It's really British, but it's also like the Roman Empire, right, from way back when. And it's this idea that there's some kind of totalitarian ruler. There's one ruler like Alexander the Great, or, somebody, Hitler wanted to do this too, right? And they take over all this land, all these countries, all this territory, and they hold all the business interests, all the economics, the finances, and then dictate through imperialism the culture. Okay, through imperialism, they dictate the culture and the economics, everything. That's an empire. So the Roman Empire, the British Empire. And what ends up happening is that because of all this stuff between the US and Spain and France, and like territories being shifted around all over the place, we meaning the United States, start creating our own empire, what we want to become an empire, right? It doesn't end up like the British Empire. We don't go take over other countries. Or do we? Right? Oh, that's a good question. I can't believe I said we don't take over other countries, right? Because eventually we get what? Puerto Rico, Samoa, Philippines, right? We do take over other countries, right? The U.S. Virgin Islands. Okay, so that was a tangent. So what we want to look at is how we start creating empire and what that looks like and what that means. So very specifically, through the Louisiana Purchase, here's how we get the entirety of the states of Louisiana, Missouri, Arkansas, Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Oklahoma. In addition, we, the country, get parts of Kansas, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, and Minnesota. That's a third of the United States, right? So if you can think of the United States at this point as three parts, the East Coast, well, four really. The East Coast, which is us in Philly, the South, right, which is like its own thing still, always has been its own thing. The Midwest, we just bought through this Louisiana Purchase. And then the West Coast, which we're going to get to in a minute through Manifest Destiny. Okay, so at this point, we have four parts to the US. We now just covered how we got the Midwest. Okay, we have the East, we have the South, right? Okay, all right, so just make sure you go through this Louisiana Purchase. So how do we get this connection between the Louisiana Purchase and the Haitian Revolution? Like, Haiti is so far away, right? Haiti is all the way down here. How do we even get there? So this is what you're going to read in this. So here's, I'm not going to read this to you. Remember, this is the really key thing to remember about Haiti and its first connection to the United States, sort of the mythologization of Columbus and Hispaniola, right? Remember that Columbus never set foot in the United States as we know it, right? Never. He never got past the islands of what they called at the time Hispaniola, which what we call today is Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Remember, that's on one island and it's like split in half. Not literally, but you know what I mean. Okay. So Columbus then went and committed mass genocide of millions and millions of people in the Arawaks, right, which were the native tribe in Hispaniola, and in part the Taínos, which are the native population of Puerto Rico. But he stops at the islands. He never comes here, right? We're not named Columbia. We're not named, we have nothing to do with Columbus, right? We're named after Amerigo's Vespucci, right? So even though 1 million people had been here already by then, right? The Chinese, the Vikings, like tons of people had been to the United States before. And obviously the Native Americans, right? But what ends up happening, and you'll read this through the thing, is that through the Haitian Revolution and the Louisiana Purchase, so here's the island right there, Hispaniola. What ends up happening, wait, I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry, I lost my screen share. Okay, so what ends up happening is really fascinating. So Thomas Jefferson, who's president at the time, says that he wants this Louisiana Purchase. He wants all this territory from France that is the middle, right? And like New Orleans. That's why they speak French still in New Orleans, right? And or like Creole, but combination of French. And though, who owns the rest of the bottom? Who owns Florida? Who owns what's our Southwest? Who now our Southwest? Who owns Mexico at the time? Spain, right? Where's the map? There we go. Is owned by Spain. So we have this really problematic country right now. So we're in this moment of like, what's happening in 1800? Our country, the United States, is carved up like a Thanksgiving turkey, and it's owned by all these European powers. We're trying to create an empire, but they want to create empires. Napoleon wants a French empire. He wants to take over the world, just like Alexander the Great, just like these, you know, crazy totalitarian rulers before him. So it's like, again, it's a lot of like little political deals and shady things happening in back rooms between people. But what ends up happening is that the Louisiana Purchase, right? Then what also happens is that there's the Haitian Revolution. So this guy, Toussaint Louverture, I did that with a Spanish R. I don't speak French. He ends up having this revolt against France, saying, I don't want to be owned by France. We are a Black country. I don't want to be ruled by you. I don't want to be colonized by you. We are human beings. We are, you know, owners of our own bodies, of our own territory, and you need to get the bleep out of our country. So it's this crazy time where Napoleon is trying to basically create an empire of the United States. But remember from last week, he's at war with England, right? Because he wants that empire too. Then the French Revolution happens. I'm not going to go into all the details because this is an American history class, but the French Revolution starts. The people start freaking out and standing up to him. And then Haiti is like, I'm going to get in on this action. I don't want to be colonized. They're throwing off the chains of oppression and enslavement. And Toussaint Louverture is the general. He's incredible. You're more on that in the lessons. He's this brilliant, brilliant general. And Haiti becomes the first Black-owned, Black-run country in the Western Hemisphere. So why does the Haitian Revolution have anything to do with the United States? Very far apart, right? Haiti's 7-hour plane ride or something, right? 6-hour plane ride. Why does Haiti impact the United States? The Louisiana Purchase, right? Napoleon's broke. Napoleon starts losing all his money. He's being attacked. He thinks he's going to take over the world. People start coming back at him, right? He like really is under siege. He ends up not doing so great, not working. It doesn't work out for him. And so he wants to sell. So the Louisiana Purchase goes through. So Napoleon is selling off his land because he's under siege, right? From Britain, from Haitians. Okay. So in the modules, you're going to learn more about the Louisiana Purchase, more about the Haitian Revolution, more about Toussaint. He's amazing. And sort of what all that means and how it impacts the United States. Okay, so that's the first half of this week. There he is. I don't speak French, but I'm pretty sure I'm saying it slightly correctly, Toussaint Louverture. But what's really important is you're going to learn a lot about, in this like a short video, you're going to learn a lot about race relations and just, it's so interesting. The Haitian Revolution is fascinating, but how it really concerns us, and this is all you're going to, James Monroe, and you're going to learn about the Monroe Doctrine and all sorts of stuff. And there's the Louisiana Purchase. Okay. Okay. So there's that. All right. So that's in your lessons. That's this, the Louisiana Purchase and the Haitian Revolution and how they connect. So here's a little bit more about the consequences of the Louisiana Purchase and how it affects us maybe a little bit more. The Compromise of 1850 is just interesting to know because it connects to the U.S.-Mexican War. You do not have to click on all these. It's just, I don't know, like more information for you if that's interesting. But here's where I really want to go next. So the first part, again, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. The first part is Louisiana Purchase, Haitian Revolution, and how that connects to us. And then the second part is Manifest Destiny and Andrew Jackson, okay? The 7th president of the United States. All right, so one of the questions that I want you to think of before I move into the next section of today's or this week's lectures is, why do you think culturally and psychologically the Haitian Revolution impacted the United States so much? That's your question. Can you write that down in your notes? So I've explained already financially, economically, territorially, right? Politically is in your readings, why the Haitian Revolution connected to the United States. But riddle this for me. Why is it, and how is it that the Haitian Revolution impacted us psychologically, us meaning United States as a country? How did it impact us culturally, spiritually? How does it impact us in like deeper ways? Okay, that's not explained in your readings. Maybe not necessarily. It's probably mentioned somewhere, but okay. And I want you to do critical analysis and think that through. So that's your sort of ending question for that unit. Okay. All right, let's move on. So what I want you to focus on right now is this dude, Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson is a complicated figure. I don't even know where to start with him. He is known to some as being one of the South's heroes. He is known as being an incredible general in the war, General Andrew Jackson. He's known as being a brilliant man. He's also known as the designer of the Indian Removal Act of 1830. So Indian removal, I capitalized because it's an actual title. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 is an actual law. And I also put it in quotes because it's disgusting, right? Because it's a disgusting thing. So Andrew Jackson, in my estimation, as a historian, I would put him as not one of the greatest heroes of America. I would put him as an autocratic leader. And an autocrat is a ruler, not a leader, not someone who leads people, but who rules people, is a ruler who has absolute power. So it's a ruler who makes up laws that only benefit themselves. They make up policies of like whatever they feel like. So Andrew Jackson was an absolute Indian hater, right, is his thing. So I'm just checking my dates here. So his presidential term was from March 1829 to March of 1837. I'm just double checking. I don't want to give you the wrong dates. So 1829 to 1837. And the Indian Removal Act is 1830. So his legacy became just hatred of Native Americans. And he did everything in his power, from passing laws to cultural genocide, to remove them. He literally believed that they should be removed from territory, they should be removed from American identity, that they should be removed from everything. He, of course, was also an African-American slaveholder and kept slaves his entire life. He had one in particular that she came to be with them, sold to them when Andrew Jackson, when she was 10 years old, and stayed with them until he died. So he was a practitioner of enslavement. He brought slaves into the White House. And let me just be clear here. I'm going to pause for a second. Let me be clear here. When a lot of historians will say, oh, they were a product of their time, right? The presidents were a product of their time. Of course, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington were slaveholders. Of course, Andrew Jackson was a slaveholder. That's what everybody did. I just want to challenge that notion. I want to challenge it because, first of all, not everybody was a slaveholder. There were very few plantations that actually existed and were running plantations. There's this idea that everybody in the South had a plantation and had hundreds of slaves. It's not accurate. It's not accurate at all. Only the very, very wealthy had plantations and had like a large Black enslaved population. Thomas Jefferson was one of those people. He had 200 something plus slaves that he kept at Monticello, his big plantation in Virginia, where he also kept his mistress, Sally Hemings, who, had 6 children by him. and was his like life partner, basically, but enslaved, and he didn't even free her on his deathbed. He freed his children by her and didn't free her on his deathbed. That ain't love, right? That is not love. That's enslavement. That's oppression, right? Some people talk about the love story of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. No, that's not love. That's abuse and assault and oppression. But here's the thing. So we can say maybe they are a product of their time. However, let's take a look at John Adams and John Quincy Adams, second and sixth presidents. They were not slaveholders. They did not bring slaves into the White House. They believed that slavery, Black enslavement, and Native American enslavement were abominations and against Christianity, against Jesus's principles. So when people talk about, oh, they're a product of their time, no. There are people who are not a product of their time. Rosa Parks saying, this is what's happening in my time. And no, I'm not going to sit in the back of the bus. I'm not going to be treated like this, right? There's Malcolm X who says, no, I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to wait like MLK is telling me to. I'm not going to wait for white people to come around. I want my rights and I want them now, right? By any means necessary, right? So there's plenty of people who are not a product of their time. They see the bigger picture. They know better. They know that things are wrong. If you, like all these people being Christians, are following the Bible's actual principles to do unto others as I want to be done to me, what's another? I only know like 3 passages in the Bible. I'm not Christian. That, you know, whatever. That was my Bible passage. Then you don't enslave other people, right? Then you don't create mass genocide against Native Americans, right? So it's sort of a detour from what we're talking about, but there's 2 parts that I want to be really clear on. One, not everybody is a product of their time. We know better. We see better. We see through the matrix of this, you know, talk about inferiority, right? And who's superior and who's inferior. The second thing that I want to be really clear on is with Black enslavement and the African slave trade through the Middle Passage and just the African slave trade in general to the United States, right? There's a whole Dutch slave trade that has its own history when they started the slave trade, right? But I want to also be really clear about this. So Black enslavement in the United States, what percentage do you think of all the tens of millions of Africans that were kidnapped and enslaved and tortured do you think landed in the United States? What percentage do you think? Like 90% of all the slaves kidnapped from Africa were brought to the United States? Like 50%, what do you think? Right? Maybe jot down a number in your notebooks. The number of Africans that were kidnapped and sold to the U.S. in slavery was 5%. 5%. So where did all these millions and millions and millions of kidnapped and tortured Africans go? Where do you think? Write that down in your notes. Where do you think? Where'd they go? Where'd 95%, right, of the people go? They went to the islands, right? They went to Europe and they went to the islands. So circling back from Andrew Jackson, who's a strong, staunch believer in Black enslavement and Native enslavement and genocide. There's 5% of the African Black enslaved population coming here. Where else are they going? They're going to Haiti, the Dominican Republic, right? They're going to the islands. They're going to South America, right? They're going to French Guiana. They're going to Europe. only 5% came to the United States. And that was still, right? 5 million people. That was still millions of people, right? That's how horrifyingly large the Black African enslaved industry, right, enterprise was. Haiti was demolished of its Native population, of its indigenous population. The indigenous peoples of the Haitian islands, right, the Hispaniola Islands, were genocided. They were all murdered, all of them, from Columbus and his encomienda system, right? The islands were then repopulated with African slaves, right? They were kidnapped and tortured across the Middle Passage and brought to the islands, right? So what were native islands became Black islands. And the 5% that came to the United States then were enslaved on, most often, plantations in the South. Okay? So just keep in mind, things aren't always the way they seem. And people don't have to be a product of their historical context. People knew better, and they didn't do better, right? Columbus didn't do better. He did worse than Hitler. Why do we have schools named after him, right? Why do we have Columbus Day? It's insane, right? It's insane. So when we talk about someone like Andrew Jackson, and people are like, oh, he's brilliant, he's a hero, he's really not. He was possibly one of the worst presidents for women, natives, Africans, right? He was one of the worst presidents for marginalized populations. And we can see this primarily through what he did after the Louisiana Purchase. What did he want to do with all that territory we gained from the French? Use it as slave territories, right? Make slave states. He wanted to bring the enslaved into more and more states. Remember, we're all just states, United States of America, right? He wanted, remember from last week, he brought Texas in as a slave state. Well, he didn't do it, but Texas was brought in as a slave state, right? Because enslavement as an institution, as an economic policy, couldn't go north. Our states were free and didn't want slavery. The South was full. The West was Native American, right? Until the Louisiana Purchase. So they went south, right? Southwest. Texas was brought in to expand the Southern slave trade. Florida was to expand the Southern slave trade. So when we think about like Florida and Texas, they're so conservative, they're gun carrying, Texas was the last to announce, wouldn't tell the enslaved, right, about that slavery had ended, a long time earlier, Juneteenth. That's Texas. It was brought in as a slave state. Texas and Florida are functioning exactly as they're supposed to, as slave states, right? So all of this connects. Do we see how all of this connects? This is a lot. So normally in a 15-week class, I separate these out, right? But we're an accelerated class. We're an accelerated 10-week class. So are we seeing how all these pieces connect? There's so much happening, right? So what does Andrew Jackson do with all this territory now of the Louisiana Purchase? What does he do if he is a slaveholder and believes that African slaves are less than and inferior to him? If he hates Native Americans and believes that they are quote unquote savage and uncivilized, then what's he going to do? What's he going to do with all that, the whole Midwest, right? We have free states, slave states, Native American territory, right? So what happens? Indian removal, right? Yeah, Indian removal. So here's Indian removal. So if you click on this, if you click on these links, this file comes up. This is a great document. It's Manifest Destiny and Indian Removal. So it starts with Louisiana Purchase, and it walks you through the concept of manifest destiny. So manifest destiny is really important because I want to see if they have the painting. No, okay. And they've got vocab, by the way. They have vocab down here, which is really important. American Progress painting is what it's called. Done by John Guest. Now, this painting wasn't done until 1872. However, it was put out, much earlier. How do I make this big? Here we go. Okay, so if we're doing analysis of a primary source document, we would look at an original speech, an original newspaper column from the time period. We can also look at art. And art is such a great cultural artifact through which to view the lens of how people were seeing and interpreting their lifetime at that time. So this is called American Progress. And it was done in 1872, but it was representing the 1830s. So, if we were in person, I'd say, what do you see here? And what are we looking at? And we can't really do that in an online class, but if we were in person, and when I teach this in class, what we do is we go through and we look at all the parts of the painting. So what do you see? Maybe jot down in your notes, what do you see? How are we moving from progress on the East Coast and bringing that progress over to the West Coast? I love this dude right here who's like giving the middle finger, right? This native dude who's like, right? I love this dude the best. I like this bear too. If you can zoom in your own thing, you can look this up on Google. This bear is like, it's pretty rad. So what is progress? So progress apparently is a white woman with her boob out. It's also, so there's racism there, there's sexism, there's like a lot of intersectionality happening there. There's also, do we know what this wire is? You might say telephone. At the time, it was telegraph. It's sending like that Morse code, the like beep, 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 beep. It's that stuff. But it would be eventually telephone as well. You can see here trains going across, right? Remember, we're building the Transcontinental Railroad. They started on the West Coast and the East, and they met in the middle. So Transcontinental Railroad, we're looking at shipping, right? We're also looking at this displacement of Native Americans, of course. So this becomes manifest destiny. The displacement of Native Americans then is seen as required. It's seen as necessary for the progress of the United States. So if you're not part of progress and civilization, what are you? Uncivilized, savage, heathen. Right? So in order for, and you can see they're all white Americans, Anglo Americans, to move into the West, they need to do it by Indian removal. So that's this. No, wait. I thought I already had this up. Here, this. So this article is really readable. It's so good. It's done by the Smithsonian American Art Museum, and they just do a great job of giving all the historical context to what's happening. So Manifest Destiny, the slogan is greed, God, and glory. So that kind of sums up Manifest Destiny. But the real technical definition, as you'll see in the readings, is the idea that Anglo-Americans, white Americans, but at that point, white was kind of, it just meant really the British. Because remember, Irish weren't white, Jews weren't white, Italians weren't white. So we say Anglo because it really is this Anglo-Saxon, British definition of whiteness. And we'll get to that. we'll get to this. How does white become white later on? But so Anglos believe that God has ordained them as superior to everybody else. And they believe in this white superiority to the point that they believe they have domination over people of color, in for sure Native Americans, right? And that manifest destiny compels them to take over territory and people, animals, land, right? Anything, women, anything that they see as weak or inferior to them. And it's their duty. They are bound to God to uplift them, all these inferior peoples and populations and earth. Okay. And I put the earth in there because Native Americans treated the earth really well. It's where their gods lived. But because they were hunting and fishing and, traveling, following herds and subsisting off the land, Anglos believed that that was a misuse of the earth, that you had to build factories. Well, not yet, but that you had to build on it, that you had to settle on it, right? It's settler colonial mentality. You had to settle the land. You had to build houses. You had to build factories. You had to build stuff on it. That's the only way to interact with the land. And if you didn't do that, you were uncivilized. Civilization for Anglos only looks one way. And if you don't do it that way, you're wrong. Right? So manifest destiny encapsulates all the ideas of empire, land theft, colonialism, genocide, civilization being only written language and like looking a certain way, Christianity, right? There's only one God according to them, right? This one Bible God, yeah. English language, right? No other languages, no other, ways of communicating, and on and on and on, right? Cultural imperialism, colonization, right? All the things. Andrew Jackson decides not only should manifest destiny be like the way of thinking, but it should also be the law. So he creates the Indian Removal Act of 1830. And it literally removes, oh, there it is. I know I had it somewhere. It literally removes the Native Americans from their land. So it physically takes them, enslaves the people, right? And moves them 5,000 miles from where they live and where they've lived for tens of thousands of years to the reservation system, where then they have no freedom, no independence. They have no way to feed themselves. They're now out of their culture, right? They get put in Indian boarding schools, all of the things, right? All the things that end up happening. So here's the Trail of Tears, which we know now as the Trail of Tears. So here's Andrew Jackson's feelings about the Trail of Tears. By persuasion and force, quote, they have been made to retire from river to river, from mountain to mountain, until some of the tribes have become extinct and others have left but remnants to preserve for a while their once terrible names. Surrounded by the whites with their arts of civilization, which by destroying the resources of the savage, meaning rivers and bison, right, buffalo, doom him to weakness and decay. Andrew Jackson, 1829. Not the greatest president in my mind. I'm just saying, my opinion. Okay. So really echoing Columbus, really echoing all of the other autocrat rulers, these totalitarian rulers, right? So here's a video I want you to watch about the Trail of Tears. And here's a clip. Again, it's 1 minute, but it's just this idea of really covering the images and the feelings of it, right? I want to get across
that one of the hardest winters in memory would strike that year.
I want to get across the emotion of it and the psychology of it.
When they reached the Mississippi River, the river was frozen. There were 3 different detachments trapped between the Mississippi and another river frozen behind them. And there they sat for weeks in deep, deep snow and ice.
As long as they were moving, maybe it wasn't so bad, but when you actually had to wait for the ice and sit there, and maybe you're sleeping on snow, but you're probably sleeping on melted mud, and you're sick, your baby's sick, your grandmother's sick, and there's nothing you can do about it.
So what we're sort of learning through the Trail of Tears is that not only is there just, a lack of any kind of humanity, right, from the presidents and from all the Congress and Senate and House of Representatives that end up ratifying these laws, but there's also this sense that it's doing good for them, right? It's this just absolute belief of manifest destiny, of the white man's burden, of autocrats, of white supremacy, of white nationalism. Sound familiar to today? That Anglos have the right to do this to Native Americans. They have the right to enslave Africans, right? They really, through this idea of manifest destiny, believe that their cause is just, right? Where did my screen go? Right? That their cause is just, that what they're doing is not only acceptable, but like helpful, progressive for civilization. Okay. So it's just a lot. It's a lot to take in. It's just a lot to take in. Okay. So I want you to watch all of that and watch those videos. Let me get my desktop back. Okay, sorry about that. So I just have too many windows open on my computer. So really what it becomes is, what is this painting leaving out, right? Like, what is not in this painting, right? The Trail of Tears is not pictured in this painting. The absolute genocide of the attempted genocide of Native American tribes is not in this painting of this white woman who's bringing progress to the United States. There's no, Black enslaved peoples being assaulted, beaten, murdered in this painting. So let's look at the ways in which history, through art, through dominant media, through autocratic leaders that are just bamboozling us, has been whitewashed. What are the ways in which history has been whitewashed and mythologized to the point that manifest destiny sounds like a good idea? Right? That the Louisiana Purchase is like, oh, of course, we bought the Midwest. We had to do that to expand the United States, right? Oh, the Monroe Doctrine, sure, right? All the things. Okay. So please do the readings. And then I have sometimes here, I'll put things from modern times, like this is happening right now with DAPL, the Dakota Access Pipeline. It's DAPL. And here's Native American resistance to that now, because many presidents, but especially conservative ones, believe in drilling the United States and putting in pipelines on Native reservations, on Native territories, and like digging up and saying the government has access to this, and like the government owns this land. It doesn't actually, the Native Americans living on reservations, it's under the the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs. It's owned by the U.S. government. It's still not, reservations are not owned by Native Americans, right? So the government can go in and drill for oil and look for gold and like do all these things today in 2023 that were happening in like 1823, right? Which is kind of scary, right? 200 years later, and we're literally navigating the same exact issues of like, who owns this land and what do we get to do with it? It's a modern day manifest destiny, right? So what I want to tell you, your last vocab, and I'm going to put it in the chat. I hope you can see this when I'm recording videos. I don't know, but it's called the Doctrine of Discovery. And the Doctrine of Discovery says that if I discover something, it's mine, and that overrides occupancy. What does that mean? What does that mean? So here it is in short form. Discovery trumps occupancy is how it's said in shorthand. What is that? What? Like, so I, as an Anglo settler, come onto, I find Montana, right? I go to Montana and I find Montana. I discover Montana, the state. The fact that there's 500,000 Native Americans in 25 separate tribes living there, occupying that territory, is irrelevant legally because discovery overrides occupancy. What do we think about that? When I first heard this years ago in grad school, I was like, I call bullshit. Like, what are you talking about? I'm sitting on my stoop in Philadelphia, and some dude walks up and says, I just discovered your stoop. It's mine now. And I say, I'm sitting on it. This is my house. I'm occupying this house. I'm the occupant. Nope. Nope. The Doctrine of Discovery says if I discover it, I own it. That's some Anglo-colonial settler logic if I ever heard it. Doctrine of Discovery. Okay? So all of this is all connected because of where we started in 1803, where we go with the Haitian Revolution, that France had a Doctrine of Discovery with Haiti, right? And brought in Black enslavement, killing off the Native Americans, just like we did, right? But not in totality. To create, right, genociding natives to increase Black enslavement, to create laws that create a racial hierarchy, a gender hierarchy, right? A capitalist hierarchy, all of it. Okay. And that's all in your readings. Are we seeing how all the pieces connect? It's so much, right? It's so much. Whoever is assigned this week, you can upload your read and lead right there, please. So now here's your discussion post. Manifest destiny. What do we do with this? Right? What do we do with this? What do we do with it? What do we think of Toussaint L'Ouverture? How does he compare or contrast with Andrew Jackson? I think actually I'll just make that your question because you have a quiz. Your quiz, you have 20 minutes. It's one question. It's a short essay. You can see here, it's a short essay question. It's one short essay. You have 20 minutes from when you click it open. And Please only use ideas and terms from our texts and modules. You don't need to quote directly from Remini, but you can if you want. But do not Google. If you Google my question, I will know, because I Googled the question to see what you're scamming from the internet, right? So don't scam from the internet. I really just want to know that you're reading, that you're listening, that you're watching these long videos. But just keep in mind you have 1 hour long video. But if we were in class, we'd be in class Monday, Wednesday, Friday for an hour each. So normally you'd have to listen to me 3 hours a week. These videos are only 1 hour. So do it in pieces if you need, however you need. But please remember that this is a lot less time than it would be in the classroom. So you need to take up the other 2 hours by doing the readings, okay? By doing the readings. So that's your week. That's your lessons. That's your vocabulary. Those are your module pages. And I think that's it. I think that's it for week 3. It's a lot happening, but really what I want, what you're going to show me in the essay question is how really all of this ties together to inform American identity. And back to our week 1 questions, like who gets to be an American? Who gets to be in the United States? How do they get to be in the United States? Who decides that? And what do the people and laws really say about the decisions these presidents are making, okay? And how the government is legislating our identities. And still does, right? Still does. Okay. So thank you. I appreciate you. I hope you took tons of notes. You can watch this over and over again. It'll stay up the whole semester. You don't need to watch it over again. Just make sure you take notes as we go. All right. Thank you so much. I really, really look forward to seeing your reading leads and getting to see and get to know you as people as well. Bye.